particularly before COVID, people were saying, it's all about data, it's all about data, it's all about data. And it's like, now it's all about what data? Well, I've been in communications pretty much ever since I started thinking about work. I first got involved in political campaigns when I was a kid, and I managed political campaigns for about 10 years before I ended up going to business school, trying to figure out how I could commercialize that experience. And when I found out about internal communication as a sector, as a sphere, it just made a lot of sense for me. So when I graduated from London Business School, I joined a firm that was specializing in internal communication, and it's been 20 plus years, and I'm still an internal comms person, mainly. My first job at all when I was in high school was doing telephone surveys for a company that ended up being absorbed by a firm called Taylor Nelson Sofres. And so, I kind of intuitively understood not just what data was, but how to get it. Start with the outcome. So what is it that you're trying to do? And then you come up with measurements that illustrate progress down that track. I mean, there's no point in focusing on clicks and hit rates and open rates. If your job is to do X, it's a lot easier to focus on progress towards achieving X. I mean, if it's a linear outcome, if you're trying to say, increase the number of alcohol wipes used in a hospital, this is actually an experiment that was done in Denmark. What they did was they started distributing alcohol wipes in the hospital. And then they did an internal comms campaign, and they measured the number of wipes they were using every day. And also, if you can't directly measure actions, you can measure the language that people use. You just have to ask them open-ended questions, and then identify which words are used and measure the extent to which they're used. So if, say, for instance, you're a company and you started a transformation program, are people referring to it as the name of the transformation program, or are they referring to it as something else? That's something you can measure. That's something you can baseline. That's something you can track. My big first project in terms of really owning the data collection as well as the data communication was an airline merger in the UK back around the turn of this century. It helped the business take the guesswork out, and it helped address the assumptions that people were basing their decisions and their communication and their actions on. One of the great things about data is it removes the assumptiveness out of assumptions. It gives you a place to stand. So, the extent to it, but it also requires you to be somewhat clever about the data you collect. The data has to have some relationship with what it is you're trying to do. Otherwise, you're standing on data and trying to convince people that the data is interesting and important. That's something you shouldn't have to be doing. What you should do is find data that connects with your outcome. And then you could adjust your campaign and your communication and your actions, not just to drive the stats, but to drive the outcome. My go-to metric is around the extent to which, I like asking the same two open-ended questions on every internal survey, which are, what do you think the top priorities of the business are? And what are, or say like the three top priorities specifically. And what are the three most important things you're working on, or the three most important things in doing your job? You ask those two questions and you categorize and measure the answers. You can see very clearly whether people are working to their own agendas, their boss's agenda, or their company's agenda. Asking qualitative questions, and asking qualitative questions. don't be intimidated by data in general. Don't worry too much about whether your outcomes can be quantified, but just be honest about what your outcomes are and get the organization to be honest about what their outcomes are. You have to have an outcome that is measurable in order to have data that supports its conclusion. And if they haven't come up with a measurement, you need to suggest the measurement. Be brave in suggesting the measures. I mean, the whole real kind of disaster around employee engagement has a lot to do with the fact that the big measurement tool, the Q12 from Gallup, involves a bunch of measures which aren't directly actionable by managers.